Well, hello everyone. Today we are joined by Simon Delaney, who is the CEO of Databowl. And Databowl is a lead management software that's been around in the UK for a long time. So Simon, thanks for leaving your ivory tower of your own podcast to join one of our fireside chats. How's it all going?
Yeah, all going well, thanks. The weather's pretty nice today. So, I don't know what the temperature is. It's t-shirt weather, I can see, but I'm in a colder office. But yeah, all going well, thanks.
Good.
Yeah.
So we always start these things, as I'm sure you do, with sort of a brief introduction of who you are, what Databowl is, and just a little overview of your journey thus far, if possible.
Sure. So I started in online marketing and specifically lead generation for B2C in around 2005, 2006. And I joined a company at the time that had just entered a 3-year earnout with the Daily Mail Group. So when I went in, it was like a massive task. We've got to grow this company against all odds. Because the owners wanted to make more money in their earnout. But what was amazing about that is it actually gave me number one, like massive motivation, because they're like huge targets, and everyone in the company was extremely motivated. But I took like a massive deep dive, like an incredible deep dive that I just don't hear about many people having, apart from the people I worked with at the time, actually, into online lead generation. I got to know everyone in it all over the world. We used to do absolutely everything. So we had like co-reg sites, we'd do solus forms, we'd do tracking. We used to do things like face-to-face leads, like online, offline, absolutely everything. So I spent those 3 years really, really cutting my teeth into that area. And one of the things that like quickly became apparent to me was the technology involved. And obviously in 2005, 6, 7, it was relatively rudimentary. So we were still APIing data out and stuff like that to clients for live leads. But a lot of those APIs have to be sort of custom built. So you'd have to bring a developer in and do it and whatever else. So everything became like slightly laborious. Nothing was quick. Nothing was automated. It just felt like it was a constant thing being held back. So really early on, I kind of decided this is an area I'd love to work in, is building software out to automate this process and make the whole thing quicker, more efficient, reduce the fraud, reduce bad data. And really that's where the idea for Databowl came about. So fast forward to about 2015, so actually about 10 years later, and that's when we really started building Databowl and sort of commercializing it. So we probably started trading in earnest in, say, 2016. And now we're running in 26, 27 different countries. We process a lot of leads. You can do stuff like build landing pages in Databowl. It's a lead distribution system. So we work closely with brands buying leads that want to automate the process and make it more efficient and qualify leads and verify them. And we work a lot with lead generators that want really bespoke built landing pages and really efficient automation to run it through.
Got it. Okay. So for the brands, like how do they use your services? Because maybe our audience is kind of familiar with lead generators, and this is, in a simplified version, right? Someone that has multiple buyers of a potential lead, where you can route those potential users intelligently to the right buyers, right? But how do direct advertisers use you?
So they use it in a few different ways. So I'll give you like a couple of examples of like heavy duty users. So brands that outsource their sales or have multiple call centers, let's say, where they're directing leads to. So these are typically relatively high ticket items, right? So we're talking stuff like, I don't know, switching energy provider, where it's going to be like thousands of pounds, or it could be broadband, it could be mobile. You think of all those like direct touch points where people maybe want that bit more of a personal touch with people. So what happens is if you're a brand and you have all this data coming in and you've got like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 call centers that the leads are being distributed to. You need a central repository where all that data can go into. You can verify it all, you can dedupe it all, you can suppress it against your current customers, and you can access in a transparent manner and take complete control of all the data that gets distributed out to those call centers. So even though you're not doing the sales because you're outsourcing it, because most of the brands wouldn't necessarily have that big a sales team, they license call centers to do it. It still means that they've got like a handle on it, and they can see everything that's going on. So they'll use Databowl as a sort of single point of truth for all the data coming in. So that's one way that they use it. And the other way could be, so I know one of our clients, for example, HelloFresh, use it globally. So they have, it's kind of a similar problem, but it's more on a global level rather than like a local level, distributing it out to clients. So they have leads coming in from everywhere, like loads of different channels, loads of different partners, sources, and everything else. And again, they need like a single place that they can take complete control of those leads and then decide how they're going to action those leads. So it could be, I'm going to send an SMS to people who look like this. I'm going to send an email to people like this. That person needs a call, or this person needs that sort of email. And so within Databowl, they're verifying all the data that they receive, like literally, is that a real person? Is that a real email address? Is the postal address correct? They're qualifying all that data. So they're making sure, are they a person who could be our customer? Are they worth contacting? Whatever else. And then they're deciding how they're actually going to sort of distribute those leads and then contact them. So, within that, there's all sorts of weird and wonderful other ways that brands use it. But that's just two sort of quick examples on a sort of global scale and a more local scale that brands use Databowl.
Got it. And would you say that the split between, let's say, agencies or people that are not the direct client and the brands themselves, like, are you at liberty to say what the split is in your business for that? And is there one section that's growing more than the other?
Yeah, so we tend to have more agencies, I would say. But that's more to do with when we work with brands, it's usually like contractual terms. It's a simple thing, but it can take like months, potentially even years to work on that basis. So yeah, we work with quite a lot of agencies that are effectively running lead generation either as a network for their clients. So they'll have like their own publisher base, and then they're pulling leads in. They have a bunch of clients that then they're distributing leads to. And then on the other side, as you mentioned, we have lead generators. So in Databowl, you can build landing pages. So they'll build their landing pages, drive traffic to those, and then distribute them out to the clients that they work with. In terms of the split, it's fairly even. We'll have some massive brands that are like, run internationally in the multi-billion dollar turnover companies. And then we'll have some smaller brands that use the system as well. So we work with quite a lot of SMEs, but they're still brands. They're the end sales point. The data's being driven to. Yeah.
Very cool. And so today, I think we touched upon this just before we spoke of a theme of what themes can add value to people that are perched on the end of their seats, listening to your every word with hushed tones.
What, the monotone drone?
But we were kind of talking about kind of tech, and you mentioned obviously tech, and this kind of theme of integration between different systems playing with other systems to create synergies within people's business that adds more value than the single components, right? And obviously at Everflow, we're a partner management platform. Essentially, what we allow companies to do is to build, scale, manage, and optimize their own affiliate or partner program. They can do that through a lot of automation, invoicing, reporting, UIs for affiliates to sign into. And typically our clients are a mixture, just like yours, of either direct advertisers or agencies that are working on behalf of their clients to take users into landing pages and complete actions and so on. And so we are finalizing an integration between Everflow and Databowl to do that. And I think we've got a couple of joint clients who are great at what they do, are media buyers and also agencies that are two separate sort of businesses. What sort of trends have you seen in terms of lead generation generally over the if we sort of address the both camps, let's say networks and the direct brands, what sort of best practices, what big themes have you seen in the last sort of 3 or 4 years that are kind of noteworthy and that are worth other people taking stock of?
Well, I think a big thing that's happened in the last 3 or 4 years, or the biggest thing, is GDPR, right? Because when you're dealing with first-party data and specifically people's personal details, that's a sort of massive impact in terms of the due diligence that brands especially might want to carry out on something like a partner network, because they're desperate to know not only like where did this data come from, but where is that the traffic coming from beyond that, that's driving this data. And so I'd say it's actually weeded quite a lot of the bad actors out. So I think there's been a general improvement in lead generation in the last 3 to 4 years is one of the biggest things that I would say. The other thing is the adoption of automation is becoming more of a sort of necessity, I guess, rather than it being like a nice to have. I think in the past people would be, still pushing spreadsheets about, maybe sending emails with data on, like each time a lead signed up. I mean, I know people that still do that, right? And every time they go to me like, can you just make it easier to send an email with someone's data on so I don't have to put the parameters in? I'm like, you shouldn't be doing that, right? Like that's why you don't want it to be easy. Like, yeah, it should be difficult. But there's something really interesting about it, which is in the EU, and not in every country, they're definitely slightly behind the UK, and I'd say even further behind the US in terms of the adoption of automation. And there's some companies in the UK that, it's really weird because you sort of think, well, are they like heavily involved in performance marketing and lead generation? Why are they still like pushing spreadsheets about and, doing these sort of weird little manual tasks? So yeah, I think automation, GDPR, and the sort of understanding of the need to be more transparent with people's personal data. It's something that I push quite a lot, this sort of understanding you don't own the data, you just own a right if the person's consented to contact them for marketing or sales purposes. That sort of feeds into GDPR as well. Yeah, definitely. How about you? What have you thought in the last 3 to 4 years has changed?
Well, I would agree with that. I mean, definitely automation is a big one. I think the granularity is a big one of being able to drill down and understand and make these kind of marginal gains from the activity that you're buying. Traffic's got a lot more expensive to buy. So let's say if you're a lead gen provider and you're buying on, let's say, a native network, a Taboola, an Outbrain or so on, you really need to know what you're doing to not only drive interest, awareness, desire, and action for people to actually kind of click through, but you also need to, and this is where your system comes in, I guess, understand very quickly, like how quickly are those leads being worked on, and also doing a due diligence for brands of like, are they able to work? First of all, what's their budget? Is it an ongoing budget? Because if I'm buying traffic on a CPC basis and I'm essentially paying for learning, if I'm a media buyer, and this campaign ends after a short run, then that's not going to be that beneficial to me. So I think part of it's like understanding what the buyer wants. Do they have long-term budgets? Are they working those leads quickly? And then being able to kind of scale up sort of accordingly. So, I mean, I think the automation is a big one. And then this theme that we kind of touched on of like linking it all together, right? Because that does become, I think the whole sort of, I was going to say stratosphere of kind of like.
I like that. Like you need to trademark that, the sassosphere. It's a bit of a tongue twister.
It is a bit of a tongue twister. But I was kind of explaining it like to a friend that's completely outside the industry. Like a lot of companies now are using like SaaS in the way that the house is lifted up in the film Up, with those balloons. It's like you've got all of these different SaaS products. They're helping raise your business, and you can jettison them just like a balloon if they're not working, or they're not playing well with the ecosystem. So say, for example, let's say there's a lead buyer. Let's say they're using Everflow to run activity on Taboola or Outbrain or one of the native platforms. You want those CPC costs carried through into Everflow so you can see that within this unified dashboard. You want to know exactly the cost of that traffic and so on. And then as the leads go through to the buyer, to someone like yourself, if you're doing those three things that you kind of mentioned, the qualification, the verification, and then the distribution of those leads, that all needs to happen pretty quickly, and I think, there's been a lot of pressure on sort of concertining that whole process, right? Because back in the day, and I don't know if you remember this, but I was at IPT, which is a very big lead generation business.
I was at DMRI at the same time. We were doing a similar thing.
Yeah. And back then, the data used to come in on an Excel spreadsheet and people would get round to phoning that person, wouldn't they? And that's not what a consumer wants now. Everyone wants the whole process to be that much shorter and so on.
Yeah. And I think there's a really important point in terms of the integration of technology that you talked about. So just to give like a quick example of what we're talking about. So if you're doing media buying and you're buying native and you're tracking all of that in Everflow, and what you actually, the end result is some first party data because someone's clicked it, they've gone through to a form, filled the form in, you've then pulled the tracking through to the landing page, got this user from the ad, everything else, you can actually pass the parameters of everything that's being tracked in Everflow. So that'd be, the ad that's being used, the landing page that's being used, the source, the subsource, everything else. Pass that in as first party data. But so all of this is really important, right? And then immediately do everything we spoke about. So qualify the lead, verify it immediately, and distribute it. And that will all happen in milliseconds, right? And so what happens is that person gets contacted straight away if that's what they're wanting, or there could be a calendar fill. But there's another point beyond that. And this is actually I should have mentioned this when you said what's changed in the last 3 to 4 years. I wouldn't say it's changed, but it's changing. And this is the understanding that the endpoint that data has been sent to is equally as important for them to feed the outcome back to the lead generator or the agency or whence it came from, because they need to decide, where do we place our budget to get the outcomes that our clients need? And so they need to go, this makes sales, this doesn't make sales, traffic from there is bad, traffic from there is great, shift budget here, remove budget there, and everything else. And you can't do that without integrated systems all acting in sort of an being orchestrated together, and all this sort of real-time updates, feedback loops, and everything else happening in one. And that's the great thing about passing the parameters in with the ad, you see, because what happens if it doesn't is when it comes back without that information on, you'd have to go into another system to work out, well, it was this ad, this, whatever else. Comes back with the information on, create a webhook back to like Everflow, for example, from Databowl. Instantly, we know the outcome of these leads at a metadata level and the first party data level. And all we're trying to do is improve the results for that end client so they can make more sales. Because what happens is they give you more budget, you get more budget to spend on ads that work, you increase the volume of traffic on landing pages, they get more sales. We did a podcast the other day and we were trying to think of the opposite of a vicious circle, and we just ended up calling it a nice circle. We'll just call it a nice circle. Yeah, virtuous circle. So you end up with a virtuous circle. That's really what it's about, right? And that's the point of an agency as well. That's why people work with agencies. And I think this is why the transparency piece is quite important, because in the past, people have seen data as being owned by them, so they haven't wanted to feed back what's been happening. But in reality, when you're working with an agency, so this could be a lead generator or whatever it is, a network, they're actually your marketing team. Now, all it takes is a quick thought experiment. How do you treat an internal marketing team to get the optimum results? You tell them what's working and what isn't, and you do it quickly so they can optimize in real time. And that's all you need to do.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And one thing that Everflow has that we've always had really is something called events, different stages of an offer that can be tied into even offline events that happen. So let's say a lead comes through, and let's say someone's using Salesforce or HubSpot. The salesperson then follows up with that lead, maybe schedules a follow-up call or whatever. That data can be passed back into Everflow. And then just as you said, now the user of that platform can basically say, right, we know that this is actually what's happening to these subsources and the leads are being worked on in that regard. But do you think that advertisers, and this is not, maybe we could say, is there, because of this system's becoming more integrated, more harmonious, is the relationship between a typical buyer and a seller more harmonious because of the transparency, or does it still have the sort of arm's length that you kind of hinted at of, advertisers perhaps not sharing that information and maybe even lead buyers not sharing the information with the advertisers? Is it becoming more harmonious?
I think do you know what? I think I genuinely think that this is about, and it's a really like weird way of looking at it, but I think it is about thinking who owns this data. So if you attribute it to the person whose data it is, why do you care about feeding information about? Do you know, like, it's their event. It's not your event. Like, you're just, you're tracking the event that's going through them. But yeah, I agree. I think forward-thinking brands and forward-thinking agencies sort of understand that. And so they understand that the route to success is creating this virtuous circle and this harmonious relationship where they willingly give each other's information. And that's really the point. I know a lot of agencies that would go, like, for example, I don't know, if you were doing PPC, I would never send the keyword that was working, or, the landing page, I might have 5 variations of it and they just wouldn't know which variation it was. I might list it as 1 or whatever. And I mean, that's better than nothing, I suppose. But if you actually send everything over, not only can you then track if you're getting the information back in a feedback loop as the agency, but the guys doing the sales, like on the floor, know what's actually like working in real time and can see when leads are coming in, what works, what doesn't, feedback. It just creates this like open conversation. It was really weird under COVID. So we've done some lead generation in the past for like an enterprise client that we just had a long-term relationship with. It was the only lead gen that we've been doing for like the last 3 years, maybe. Before COVID, we didn't get any feedback. It was like, we don't know, we're not going to tell you what's working, and you might use the information, whatever. What happened during COVID that was really weird, because everyone was jumping on Zoom calls. Before that, it was like, I'll go to a meeting in like, I don't know, 200 miles away once a month to sit there and get like, you've done really well or you've done really badly. And that was like the extent of the feedback. What was really weird during COVID is it became a daily call that was like, this is working, this isn't working. And then those calls turned into, why don't we just automate this? So rather, let's have a call, because it's great, catching up in the 5-minute catch up going, this is working, this isn't. But if you actually just start feeding this information back this was from a dialer, because I know you can, it was just an API update. We can just act on it in real time. And then these calls aren't a 24-hour like turnaround where we go, oh no, that isn't working. We can just react in real time. And that happened, and their results just skyrocketed as a result of doing it.
Yeah, very interesting. And so for lead buyers then, what can they do to foster this transparency from their advertisers? What strategies can you suggest for them to make this virtuous circle as quickly as possible?
It's a difficult one. I think some of it's like an education piece. It's like understanding, what the results will be by doing this, like actually demonstrating and showing, by using this information that we could get back, we think we could, spend your budget more wisely, effectively. That's really what you're trying to say. And a lot of this comes down to trust, right? Like, data's an intangible product. You can't touch it. So the only way that you can make it more tangible is like adding transparency and control. And both those things sort of work together, because you can't get control without like it being transparent. So between the two of you, if you can foster that relationship so that the lead buyer or the advertiser, fully trusts this agency as their marketing team. And I think that's the way to look at it is, it's not this lead seller, lead buyer or affiliate or publisher or whatever. That is effectively our marketing team. We need to give them like all the ammunition possible to, do their job well. I think when you start looking at it like that, and you use automation that aids visibility, you've got it all going on in real time, and you develop this trust that comes from working together as well. In reality, sometimes it might not happen overnight, and maybe you shouldn't do it overnight if you're, don't trust someone. But then why would you work with them in the first place? It's a sort of weird one. Do the due diligence, make sure you trust the agency you're working with, and build this transparency and control together.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say I would echo that in the sense that we call, and I think it's a general trend now that Everflow is a partner marketing platform, and part of that is perhaps difficult conversations with the advertisers or the clients right from the get-go. I don't think that if you are a lead buyer, if you're a serious lead buyer, you shouldn't necessarily have the view that, I'm coming for your business with cloth cap in hand, because like you're not going to get the best results for them. They need to be completely open and say, well, look, but you need to ask those guys, right? How fast are you going to work the leads? How much data are you going to give back to me so I can optimize your marketing spend? And those are difficult questions unless you've got the confidence that that's the way to do it, right? And that comes from building a successful business or a successful agency where you have to ask those filtering questions, which some advertisers might be put on the back foot of answering, but it's hopefully all done with the best thing in mind, right? Because if they are not working those leads fast enough, or they don't have big budgets, then perhaps your money's going to be better spent elsewhere on campaigns, because often the agencies are paying real money for learnings, aren't they, of experimenting with different landers, different call to actions. They can obviously get synergy by working with a bunch of clients that's similar, but I reckon if you ask most people, they would rather have one or two big clients in each sector than having the need to not work so closely with a whole bunch, right?
Yeah. I think what's important for advertisers or lead buyers to understand is the pro lead, we call them pro lead generators, right? We mean the guys that are like serious, that build almost brands that are running lead generation, and they start like their positioning in the market is really clear, and they know their ideal customer group, and they really go after them, and they get attracted to the brand. They're as hard for a brand to win as it is for an agency to win a brand. So if you want to work with the very best, you have to put certain things in place, because they just won't work with you otherwise. They won't work without feedback. They won't work without this visibility, without automation, without all this real-time stuff happening. And so sometimes, if you get stung as an advertiser or a brand, but you're out working with like anyone, and you're just going after like the cheapest CPL you can get, or not doing like massive due diligence and not exploring what the possibilities are using tech and automation, your experience probably isn't going to be great. Like I know a lot of them. You probably know that a lot of them. I know a lot of really, really good lead generators, that they're going to get you sales, and a lot of them. I reckon they say no as many times as they say yes to clients. Yeah,
I would agree with that. Definitely.
It works both ways.
This is a call for transparency. This call has become, isn't it, in the sense of being transparent as a potential buyer, as in the same way that as a buyer of leads for other people. What other things are important if, let's say, from either side of the fence, would you say, for people wanting to scale? I mean, obviously, the right tech is important.
Mm.
Why should people use Databall, just as an example?
So is this lead generators or lead or anyone or?
Yeah, let's say lead generators, for example.
Yeah. So
what efficiencies can they gain using Databall?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things in this. So number one is, I think if you're a lead generator using Databall, that's what we try and push our clients towards, is almost becoming this pro lead generator. So they get this sort of understanding of what lead generation is really about and how they can improve it, and working actually to get sales, not leads. Because when you understand that it's sales that you need to get from leads, that's when you get more money from your clients, when you get more clients and things. So everything that we put in the system is sort of geared towards this understanding that really you want successful outcomes, not a high volume of leads. High volume of leads is great as well, right? But what's really great is when the cash register starts dinging. So this is why, when data comes in, we want to do everything possible to verify that's a real person. So every field will look up things against it. So not just like email address and it's a telephone number live or dead or whatever. We're looking at the number of consonants and vowels in someone's name. Is it a famous name, a Mickey Mouse name? The IP address they've entered, is it potentially fraudulent? Is it a bot? Is it a Tor browser? The address that they've entered. We used to do stuff in the past where we'd get the whole electoral roll and look at even though it was only 50% that you could get, and then run every lead that came in against the electoral roll. We used to do things like get the entire census from 1901 until the last possible date. And when the lead came in, run it against that list of names to figure out whether there's a possibility that it's a made up name or not. And then all the qualifying stuff that you can create with condition sets, holding suppression file, dedupe, all these things that basically just add up to you're more likely to increase the chances of getting a sale from a lead when it goes through Databall or not. And the real-time automation of sending leads out via APIs, having webhooks back to update other systems. We've got machine learning functionality that can look at the probability of a lead turning into a sale if you can contact them on certain ways. We build landing pages, as I mentioned, and what we really work on with landing pages is conversion principles, what's actually going to attract people. And we try and really work with clients to make them understand that you need to be a big fish in a small pond in advertising and marketing, right? And everyone thinks, oh, well, I can't compete against Nike or I don't know, whatever vertical you're in. It could be financial services. I can't compete against AXA. That's missing the point. You need to niche down, and it's about differentiation and positioning. And so what you're going after is a smaller niche within the bigger niche. And that's what we offer with our landing pages and the sort of services that we do. So I think that's how they benefit in a very long-winded answer.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And particularly your point on doubling down on a niche, isn't it? The idea really you should be an inch across, but a mile deep, in terms of what you do. I
think it's this big thing that people miss. I mean, I don't know, look at, say, life insurance market. Everyone does the same thing. They create a landing page, old couple on a beach pointing out with a smiley face. And what happens is, it's the same ads for everyone, and you're actually competing against everyone's ads. Whereas really what you should be doing is thinking, well, what niche can we go after within life insurance? So it could be, I don't know, women over 50 who drive automatic cars or electric vehicles. And so you're really niching the positioning and the messaging, and you become different to everyone else. And I think what a lot of people worry about is reducing their total audience they can go after. But that's the whole point. You want a smaller audience that you can resonate with, because you're going to get more and more of them attracted to your brand. Anyway, they're sort of diverting but it's just something we work on quite a lot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And last couple of questions, what do you think the big future trends are of lead gen? I mean, more automation and so on, but what's in your roadmap at Databall that kind of aligns with the future as you see it for lead generation?
So, there's a few things. So, one is, I think, like you mentioned, almost this idea of sort of partner marketing. So I think there's more and more marketplaces that people will go into, and I don't know if it'd remove agencies particularly, but it'll filter down the sort of really best actors. So if you've got a really good agency, or you're a really good lead generator, a really good network, the whole point of some of these marketplaces, because we're building our own as well, or we've built one, we just need to optimize it slightly more, is everyone wants to know where success comes from and who's the best, right? And so it just become more and more obvious. It's funny I mentioned machine learning. We actually started working on that like a few years ago. One of the problems with it is it's great, right? Like, you imagine start to predict the probability of someone turning into a sale. The problem is this whole transparency piece around people's personal data. They sort of need to know that machine learning is going to happen to them. So it becomes like a privacy policy thing and a transparency thing to the consumer. But what's great about it is, just to give you something that we found in the past before, is one of our clients was hitting like ROI and leads were going in and whatever else. We were running this machine learning stuff with them, and they were buying like a load of native leads, doing PPC, social, and they couldn't like turn off certain segments. It was like quite broad. But what the machine learning picked up is that there was a segment within that audience that was coming in that couldn't necessarily be removed from the targeting, but it actually worked out better for them in terms of an ROI to not call those people, even though they were coming in as leads. So we created like a condition set that if this score comes in, remove these leads and don't call them. And it actually increased like their conversion rates because the number of leads went down. But what's great about that is you can then action them in different ways. So you could go, send it an email or something. So I like to think the machine learning could potentially be used, but it needs to be seen how it could be used. And then I think some of the other things is more about like what. If you think of lead generation in its purest sense, it's almost a bit like a comparison site, or it should be potentially like a comparison site, because if it isn't, it's not necessarily the best deal for the user. It's the deal that they've come in as a lead as. So in the US, for example, when you generate a lead, the normal thing to do is actually sell that lead to 3 different companies. And so they then each offer a quote to the consumer. So I wonder if, something like that in the UK or the EU might become more prevalent, with this idea of it being more of a comparison thing and a value add to the user.
Well, that definitely makes a lot of sense to me when you were explaining that anomaly that the machine learning kind of discovered, because AI or machine learning is very good at like diagnostics of large data sets, isn't it? And finding discrete parameters or variables that can, that can form a pattern, right? So here comes a lead, and we know that actually this postcode means that this person is unlikely suitable, despite them qualifying themselves for it. Maybe something like a parameter of a postcode eliminates them from that product being the best fit, therefore don't call them, but the system will route them another lead or another product that actually might be a better fit prior to a human making that filtering process.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the problem with machine learning as well, why it's about this like transparency piece with the user, is that to really get the most out of it, you actually have to enrich the data. Because if you just come in, like I can look at like the ad you came in, the landing page, I can look at your name, address, maybe even your browser, your IP, the device you're on, whatever else. But it might not be enough to actually get strong enough signals from it. So what you typically do is you enrich it with, land registry data. So you can start to figure out what sort of house they might live in. You can do this thing like street check. So you can look at the crime levels in specific postcodes, for example. You can look at the affluence of specific areas and what roles or employment people might be in or not in specific areas. So I think this is where the problem with it lies, is that if you're really going to do it in a way that's going to, the probability is going to be really strong, you actually have to enrich it quite a lot. Now, in the US, where the laws are slightly different, a lot more lax in a lot of states, they don't love that, right? It's just bang absolutely everything in, chuck it all. In the UK and the EU doing that, it could be a selling point that you sell to a user. We enrich your data to give you the best experience, but I almost think you'd have to get the opt-in from it. We call up X, Y, and Z. A bit like when they have opt-ins to partners that they'll sell data to, and then you have to go through and tick them. Imagine I'm really diverting here, but it's just I'm thinking off the top of my head. It could be yes, you can use land registry. Yes, you can use the electoral roll. Yes, you can use the crime areas in my thing and whatever. And then all that enrichment comes in and works out, this probability because it gets a lot more signals.
Again, thinking aloud, and let's not get too freewheeling for the benefit of our audience, but maybe a trend could be of this. Okay, I'm willing for you to interrogate that data if I get a discount on the product that's right for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, there we go. On that highfalutin note.
Can I just finish on one thing as well? It's only because I read this yesterday. Do you know when you said what are the trends that you think you'll see in the future? Someone asked Jeff Bezos, he said, I get asked this question all the time, just about I don't know, general thing. And he said, I'll be honest, I have no idea. But what I do like to think about is what won't change in the future, because then, that you can sort of remain solid. So with lead gen, what won't change? People will need leads. I suspect first party data and its use is just going to grow. Lead generation is definitely going to become bigger because a lot of the furore around third party use in stuff like Google, well, not Facebook at the minute, they don't want it, but Apple and whatever else. Real-time API connections, automation, visibility, transparency, control will either get stronger or remain. And so that sort of core suite of products within software that allows all of that will grow, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry
definitely.
to interrupt you. I just
No. It's definitely worth thinking about with those terms, isn't it? Because I saw that post as well on LinkedIn, floating around, and it does make a lot of sense, doesn't it? For if you are thinking of that market, people are going to want leads that are qualified as best as possible, where they can reach the consumer faster, where the consumer is going to be able to convert, and they can realize those costs as effectively as possible, right? That's not going to change. Those are, timeless in that sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, Simon, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. And we're looking forward to continuing to work with Databowl and Everflow and Databowl continuing to work together. And we will speak to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.